In April 2023, Bud Light sent a personalized beer can to an Instagram influencer. Within 72 hours, videos of customers shooting, crushing, and pouring out Bud Light cans had gone viral. Within weeks, sales had collapsed by more than 30%. Within months, Anheuser-Busch InBev had lost $27 billion in market value, and America's best-selling beer for over 2 decades had surrendered its throne. One Instagram post, one commemorative can, $27 billion erased. This is the story of how the safest brand in American beer became the most radioactive overnight, and what it reveals about the brutal math of customer loyalty. For more than 2 decades, Bud Light wasn't just a beer. It was the beer. By 2022, Bud Light had been America's best-selling beer for over 20 consecutive years. It commanded roughly 19% of the entire US beer market, a staggering figure in an industry with thousands of competitors. Its parent company, Anheuser-Busch InBev, controlled nearly 45% of all American beer sales, making it one of the most powerful consumer goods companies on earth. The numbers behind that dominance were extraordinary. Bud Light generated approximately $6 billion in annual US revenue. It had distribution in nearly every bar, stadium, and grocery store nationwide. Its scale gave it massive pricing power and logistical advantages that smaller competitors simply couldn't match. But Bud Light's real competitive advantage wasn't taste innovation or premium branding. It was identity. Bud Light owned the working-class, middle American drinker, sports fans, construction workers, military families, rural consumers. Its marketing leaned heavily on humor, patriotism, and tradition, deliberately avoiding politics or controversy. From Super Bowl ads featuring talking frogs to backyard barbecue sponsorships, Bud Light had achieved something most brands never do: total cultural saturation. Bud Light wasn't loved, but it was trusted. And in consumer goods, trust is everything. By 2022, however, that trust was about to face a test that no amount of advertising could solve. Beneath the dominance, a quiet problem was growing. Younger drinkers, especially Gen Z, were abandoning mass-market lagers altogether. Hard seltzers like White Claw had exploded onto the scene, capturing consumers who wanted something lighter, trendier, and less associated with their parents' generation. Craft beers continued their steady march upmarket, and spirits were gaining share among younger demographics who saw beer as uncool. Between 2017 and 2022, Bud Light's US volume declined steadily, even while it remained number one. The brand was still dominant, but it was a shrinking kind of dominance, the slow erosion of a glacier rather than a sudden collapse. Internal data showed an uncomfortable truth. Bud Light's core customer was aging out. The brand's heaviest buyers were getting older, and it was not replacing them with younger drinkers at anywhere near the same rate. Consumer research revealed that Gen Z viewed Bud Light as bland, outdated, and perhaps most damagingly, boring. Meanwhile, competitors were repositioning themselves. Miller Lite leaned into nostalgia with campaigns celebrating its heritage. Coors embraced outdoor authenticity, connecting itself to mountain adventures and rugged independence. Both brands were carving out distinctive identities, while Bud Light seemed stuck in neutral. Executives at Anheuser-Busch faced a genuine dilemma. Doing nothing meant watching a slow, inevitable decline as their customer base literally died off. The status quo, selling beer without taking cultural positions, was increasingly seen as unsustainable. In corporate marketing circles, a consensus was forming. Brands needed to signal progressive social alignment to win younger consumers. Neutrality was not safe anymore. It was invisible. To stay relevant, you had to take a side. Bud Light's leadership decided to act. What they did next would determine whether the brand could reinvent itself for a new generation, or whether it would destroy the foundation that had made it dominant in the first place. In April 2023, Bud Light made what appeared internally to be a low-risk experiment. The brand sent a personalized beer can to Dylan Mulvaney, a transgender influencer with millions of followers, celebrating her one-year anniversary of living openly as a woman. The can featured Mulvaney's face and appeared in a single Instagram post on April 1st. No television ads, no national campaign, no coordinated rollout. The logic behind the decision was straightforward, at least from the marketing team's perspective. The partnership would signal inclusivity to younger, progressive consumers who valued brands that took social stands. It would modernize Bud Light's image without requiring a complete brand overhaul. And it would generate earned media through social buzz, all from what amounted to a single influencer post. Alyssa Heinerscheid, Bud Light's vice president of marketing, had been explicit about her strategy. In an interview before the controversy erupted, she said the brand needed to evolve. She said we had this hangover, referencing Bud Light's frat boy reputation, and we needed to move beyond that. Executives believed most existing customers would not notice or would not care. After all, Bud Light ran thousands of influencer partnerships every year. One Instagram post among thousands was barely a blip. The risk seemed minimal, and the potential upside, connecting with a younger, more diverse audience, seemed worth the gamble. Alternative strategies had existed. The company could have launched a sub-brand specifically targeting progressive consumers, protecting the flagship from any potential backlash. It could have tested culturally progressive messaging in urban markets before rolling it out nationally. It could have simply stayed neutral, focusing on product quality and humor rather than cultural positioning. Leadership believed neutrality itself had become a liability. In an era of social media activism, staying silent was seen as taking a side anyway, the wrong side. They believed that to win the future required demonstrating values alignment. What they underestimated was who was watching, and how those watchers would interpret not just what Bud Light did, but what it meant. Within days, the response would determine far more than the success of a single marketing campaign. It would determine whether Bud Light could survive the collision between the audience it wanted and the audience it already had. The reaction was immediate, and it was explosive. Within hours of the Instagram post surfacing on conservative media, videos began flooding social platforms. Longtime Bud Light drinkers filmed themselves shooting cases of beer with rifles, crushing cans with trucks, and pouring their fridge's contents down drains. Country music star Travis Tritt announced he was pulling Bud Light from his tour rider. Kid Rock posted a video of himself firing an automatic weapon at stacks of Bud Light cases. Conservative commentators framed the partnership not as a marketing decision, but as an ideological statement, a declaration that Bud Light had chosen sides in America's culture wars. The message spread with viral velocity. This wasn't about one can or one influencer. It was about a brand abandoning the customers who had made it dominant. The numbers told a brutal story. By early May 2023, Nielsen data showed Bud Light sales had dropped more than 23% year over year. By late May, the decline had exceeded 30%. In some markets, the collapse was even steeper. Retailers reported sales down 40% or more. For the first time in more than 2 decades, Bud Light lost its position as America's best-selling beer. Modelo Especial, a Mexican import owned by Constellation Brands, claimed the top spot in May 2023 and held it through the summer. The brand that had defined American beer drinking for a generation had been dethroned by a competitor that barely registered as a threat a year earlier. The financial damage was staggering. Anheuser-Busch InBev's market capitalization fell by approximately $27 billion in the months following the controversy. The company's stock price dropped more than 15% from its pre-April levels. Meanwhile, competitors surged. Coors Light and Miller Lite both reported significant sales increases during the same period. Retailers shifted shelf space away from Bud Light to accommodate brands that were actually selling. The competitive landscape that had been stable for decades reshuffled in a matter of weeks. Crucially, this was not a temporary boycott. Consumer behavior experts noted something unusual. Customers did not just protest, they switched. They found alternatives, formed new habits, and discovered they did not miss Bud Light at all. Once the routine was broken, it did not come back. Bud Light attempted damage control. Heinerscheid and another marketing executive were placed on leave. CEO Brendan Whitworth released a statement emphasizing the company's commitment to all Americans and its support for military communities. The brand pivoted hard back to patriotic messaging, sponsoring 4th of July events and partnering with country music festivals. None of it worked. By the end of 2023, Bud Light's US sales remained down double digits compared to the prior year. The brand had lost an estimated $1 billion in annual revenue. The customers who had built its empire, the ones who had trusted it for 20 years, showed no signs of coming back. What went wrong? 3 fundamental mistakes transformed a minor marketing decision into a catastrophic brand collapse. Mistake 1: misreading the core customer. Bud Light's leadership prioritized aspirational consumers over actual buyers. They saw the future in demographics that did not currently drink their beer, while taking for granted the ones who did. The brand's core audience, working class, rural, conservative-leaning Americans, wasn't just buying a beverage, they were buying an identity. When Bud Light signaled that its future lay elsewhere, those customers did not argue. They left. Leadership should have protected the flagship brand while experimenting elsewhere, through sub-brands or limited market tests. This mistake violated a fundamental principle: never alienate the customer who pays your bills. Mistake 2: confusing cultural approval with market demand. Inside Anheuser-Busch's marketing department, the Mulvaney partnership generated excitement. It felt modern and it felt bold. But internal applause was mistaken for external acceptance. Social media engagement metrics like likes, shares, and comments were confused with purchase intent. The strategy was validated by the wrong signals. Leadership should have validated the strategy with real purchase behavior data, not social metrics. This mistake violated another core principle: engagement is not revenue. Mistake 3: treating brand identity as flexible. Bud Light's marketers assumed they could reprogram the brand's identity through a few smart campaigns. But mass-market brands do not work that way. They are built on decades of consistent messaging, cultural positioning, and customer trust. You cannot pivot a brand that means America's everyman beer to a progressive social values beer overnight, or perhaps ever. Leadership should have respected that mass-market brands are built on stability, not ideology. The bigger the brand, the smaller the margin for error. The final lesson is stark. Bud Light's collapse reveals a brutal truth of modern business. Brands do not belong to executives. They belong to customers. A brand is a promise. Break that promise, or worse, signal that you are making a new promise to someone else, and the people who built your dominance will not fight to save you. They will simply find someone who still wants their business. One Instagram post, one commemorative can, $27 billion in market value erased. Not because Bud Light chose the wrong influencer, but because Bud Light forgot who was watching and who had been buying.